Hello, my friends. Apologies for my shiny forehead and my slick back hair. I just took a shower and I'm waiting for it to dry. But anyway, hello everybody, and welcome to another stupid idea of mine. I'm gonna read a chapter out of a book because I don't know, some people want to hear me read things. Don't ask me. So yeah, I'm gonna do that now. Today we're gonna be reading Brandon Sanderson, The Way of Kings, the book one. I've gotten through about 600 pages of it, but then I accidentally took out the bookmark that I had in place. But also, I haven't read this in like almost a year, so it's fine to restart, right? And you know what? We'll go along this journey together. So anyway, I'm gonna get started now. We'll see which speaking style I'm going to read in today. I'll try to go a little bit better than what I'm currently talking. Okay. Seth Son Vallano. That's a crazy name. Truthless of Shinovar. What the hell was that? Why'd my phone go off? What the? My phone thinks I'm talking to it. That's crazy. Wore white on the day he was to kill a king. Also, I know I got like through one sentence, but I would be using my standalone mic, but I can't find the wire to it, so you're just gonna have to deal with the shit quality mic. Also, okay, cool. At the very least, it's not my webcam mic, but you know what? Maybe next time I read, I'll use the webcam mic for your personal pleasure, aka displeasement. The white clothing was a Parshendi tradition, foreign to him, but he did as his masters required and did not ask for an explanation. He sat in a large stone room, baked by enormous fire pits that cast a garish light upon the reveries, causing beads of sweat to form on their skin as they danced and drank and yelled and sang and clapped. I feel like I'm reading like a first grader. Jesus. Some fell into the ground red-faced, the revelry too much for them, their stomachs proving to be inferior wineskins. See, my stomach is not an inferior wineskin, because I'm going to drink so much wine tonight, I could at least get through 2 whole bottles, if not 3, if not 4, if not 5. But, you know, that's me. They looked as if they were dead, at least until their friends carried them out of the feast hall to waiting beds. This guy's name is Seth. There's a Z in it, though. There's a Z in the name. Also, look at this map. Oh my god. Crazy. Seth did not sway to the drums, drink the sapphire wine, ooh, that sounds good, or stand to dance. He sat on a bench at the back, a still servant in white robes. Few at the treaty signing celebration noticed him. He was just a servant, and Shin were easy to ignore. Most out here in the east thought Seth's kind were docile and harmless. They were generally right. That's racist. The drummers began a new rhythm. The beat shook Seth like a quartet of thumping hearts, pumping waves of invisible blood through the room. You there! A voice called in Alethi. There were 2 guards in the intersection, double guard, for they were savages abroad in Kolinar this night. True, those savages were supposed to be allies now, but alliances should be shallow things indeed. This one wouldn't last the hour. Oh. Seth looked as the 2 guards approached. They carried spears. They weren't light eyes, and they were therefore forbidden the sword. Damn, more racism. Let's go. Obviously, that's a joke. Their painted blue breastplates were ornate, however, as were their helms. They might be dark-eyed, but they were high-ranking citizens with honored positions in the royal guard. Stopping a few feet away, the guard at the front gestured with a spear. Go on now. This is no place for you. He had a tan Alethi skin and a thin mustache that ran all the way around his mouth, becoming a beard at the bottom. Seth didn't move. Well, the guard said, what are you waiting for? I gave him an accent. I gave him an X for that one phrase. Alright, great. Seth breathed in deeply, drawing forth the stormlight. It streamed into him, siphoned from the twin sapphire lamps on the walls, sucked in as if by his deep inhalation. The stormlight raged inside of him, and the hallway suddenly grew darker, falling into shade like a hilltop cut off from the sun by a transient cloud. Seth could feel the light's warmth, its fury, like a tempest that had been injected directly into his veins. The power of it was invigorating, but dangerous. It pushed him to act, to move, to strike. Holding his breath, he clung to the stormlight. He could still feel it leaking out. Stormlight could be held in only for a short time, a few minutes at most. It leaked away, the human body too porous a container. He had heard that the Voidbringers could hold it in perfectly, but then, did they even exist? His punishment declared that they didn't. His honor demanded that they did. Afire with holy energy, Seth turned to the guards. They could see that he was leaking stormlight, wisps of it curling around his skin like luminescent smoke. The lead guard squinted, frowning. Seth was sure the man had never seen anything like it before. As far as he knew, Seth had killed every Stonewalker who had ever seen what he could do. What are you? The guard's voices lost its certainty. Spirit or man? What am I? Seth whispered, a bit of light leaking from his lips as he looked past the man down the long hallway. My headphones turned off. I'm trying to read. I'm clearly using my headphones, so why did it turn off? That's stupid. Alright. Anyway, this guy Seth, he's sorry. This is terrible content. Seth blinked, lashing himself to the distant point down the hallway. Stormlight raged from him in a flash, chilling his skin, and the ground immediately stopped pulling him downward. Instead, he was pulled towards the distant point. It was as if to him that direction had suddenly become down. This was basic lashing, first of his three kinds of lashing. It gave him the ability to manipulate whatever force, spren, or god it was that held men to the ground. Oh, he got gravity power. Okay, this guy's just putting fancy words together. With his lashing, he could bind people or objects to different surfaces or in different directions. From Seth's perspective, the hallway was now a deep shaft down which he was falling, and the two guards stood on one of the sides. They were shocked when Seth's feet hit them, one for each face, throwing them over. Seth shifted his view and lashed himself to the floor. Light leaked from him. The floor of the hallway again came down, and he landed between the two guards, clothes crackling and dropping flakes of frost. He rose, beginning the process of summoning his shard blade. One of the guards fumbled for his spear. Seth reached down, touching the soldier's shoulder while looking up. He focused on a point above him while willing the light out of his body and into the guard, lashing the poor man to the ceiling. The guard yelled in shock, was up, became down. I read that wrong. The guard yelped in shock, as up became down for him. Light trailed from his form. He crashed into the ceiling and dropped his spear. It was not lashed directly, and clattered back down to the floor near Seth. To kill. It was the greatest of sins. And yet here Seth stood, truthless, profanely walking on stone used for building. And it would not end. As truthless, there was only one life he was forbidden to take. And that was his own. Don't kill yourself. At the 10th beat of his heart, his shard blade dropped into his waiting hand. It formed as if it were descending from mist, water beating along the metal length. His shard blade was long and thin, edged on both sides, smaller than most others. Seth swept it out, carving a line in the stone floor and passing through the second guard's neck. Damn. As always, the shard blade killed oddly. Though it cut easily through stone, steel, or anything inanimate, the metal fuzzed when it touched living skin. It traveled through the guard's neck without leaving a mark, but once it did, the man's eyes smoked and burned. They blackened, shriveled up in his head, and he slumped forward, dead. The shard blade did not cut living flesh. Thresh? I read it wrong. A shard blade did not cut living flesh. It severed the soul itself. Hey, I mean, sounds like Thresh to me. That's stupid. Above, the first guard gasped. He managed to get to his feet, even though they were planting in the ceiling of the hallway. Shardbearer, he shouted. A shardbearer assaults the king's hall. To arms! So stupid. Finally, Seth thought. Seth's use of the stormlight was unfamiliar to the guards, but they knew a shardblade when they saw one. Seth bent down and picked up the spear that had fallen from above. As he did so, he released the breath he'd been holding since drawing in the stormlight. It sustained him while he held. How many fucking pages do I have to do? Do I have time for this? I do. Okay. I got time. I just need to pay attention to my phone when it... Well, also, I need to turn on the notification thing. Alright, sick. Sorry. 3 pages is a little bit too much for Alex. Needed to hop on his phone again. It sustained him while he held it, but those 2 lanterns hadn't contained much of it, so he would need to breathe again soon. The light began to leak away more quickly now that he wasn't holding his breath. Seth set the spear butt against the stone floor, then looked upward. The guard above stopped shouting, eyes opening wide as the tails of his shirt began to slip downward. The earth now below reasserting its dominance. The light steamed off his body, dwindling. He looked down at Seth. Down at the spear tip pointed directly at his heart. Violet fear spread crawled out of the stone ceiling around him. The light ran out. The guard fell. He screamed as he hit, the spear impaling him through the chest. Seth let the spear fall away, carried to the ground with a muffled thump by the body twitching on its end. Shardblade in hand, he turned down a side corridor, following the map he memorized. He ducked around a corner and flattened himself against the wall just as a troop of guards reached the dead men. The newcomers began shouting immediately, continuing the alarm. His instructions were clear. Kill the king, but be seen doing it. Let the Alethi know that he was coming and what he was doing. Why? Why did the Parshendi agree to this treaty, only to send an assassin the very night of its signing? More gemstones glowed in the walls of the hallway here. King Gavalier liked lavish display, and he couldn't know what he was leaving sources of power for Seth to use in his lashings. The things Seth hadn't seen for millennia. Histories from those times were all but non-existent, and the legends were horribly inaccurate. What is that even? What? Oh, I read that wrong. Okay, whatever. It says, the things Seth did hadn't been seen for millennia. Okay, I read that wrong. Great. Seth peeked into the corridor. I didn't even read that correctly. These are all easy words. Seth peeked back into the corridor. One of the guards at the intersection saw him. Oh, wait, did I read this? No, I didn't. One of the guards at the intersection saw him, pointing and yelling. Seth made sure they got a good look, then ducked away. He took a deep breath as he ran, drawing in stormlight from the lanterns. His body came alive with it, and his speed increased, his muscles bursting with energy. Light became a storm inside of him. His blood thundered in his ears. It was terrible and wonderful at the same time. 2 corridors down, one to the side. He threw open the door of a storage room, then hesitated for a moment, just long enough for a guard to round the corner and see him, before dashing into the room. Preparing for a full lashing, he raised his arm and commanded the stormlight to pool there, causing the skin to burst alight with radiance. Then he flung his hand out towards the doorframe, spraying white luminescence across it like paint. He slammed the door just as the guards arrived. The stormlight held the door in the frame with the strength of 100 arms. A full lashing bound objects together, holding them fast until the stormlight ran out. It took longer to create and drain stormlight far more quickly than a basic lashing. The door handle shook, and then the wood began to crack as the guards threw their weight against it, one man calling for an axe. Seth crossed the room in rapid strides, weaving around the shrouded furniture that had been stored there. It was of red cloth and deep, expensive woods. He reached the far wall, and preparing himself for yet another blasphemy, he raised his shard blade and slashed horizontally through the dark gray stone. The rock sliced easily. A shard blade could cut any inanimate object. 2 vertical slashes followed, and then one across the bottom, cutting a large square block. He pressed his hand against it, willing the stormlight into the stone. Behind him, the room's door began to crack. He looked over his shoulder and focused on the shaking door, lashing the block in that direction. Frost crystallized in his clothing. Lashing something so large required a great deal of stormlight. The tempest within him stilled, like a storm reduced to a drizzle. He stepped aside. The large stone block shuddered, sliding into the room. Normally, moving the block would have been impossible. Its own weight would have held it against the stones below. Yet now, that same weight pulled it free, for the block, the direction of the room's door, was down. With a deep grinding sound, the block slid free of the wall and tumbled through the air, smashing furniture. The soldiers finally broke down the door, staggering into the room just as the enormous block crashed into them. Seth turned his back on the terrible sound of the screams, the splintering of wood, the breaking of bones. He ducked and stepped through his new hole, entering the hallway outside. He walked slowly, drawing starlight from the lamps he passed, siphoning it to him and stoking anew the tempest within. As the lamps dimmed, the corridor darkened. A thick wood door stood at the end, and as he approached, small fear-spren, shaped like globs of purple goo, began to wriggle from the masonry, pointing towards the doorway. They were drawn by the terror being felt on the other side. Seth pushed the door open, entering the last corridor leading to the king's chambers. Tall, red ceramic vases lined the pathway, and they were interspread with nervous soldiers. They flanked a long, narrow rug. It was red, like a river of blood. Wow. I'm 16 minutes into the reading this. It was crazy. The spearmen in front didn't wait for him to get close. They broke into a trot, lifting their short throwing spears. Seth slammed his ham into the side, pushing Stormlight into the doorframe using the third and final type of lashing, a reverse lashing. This one worked differently from the other two. It did not make the doorframe emit Stormlight. Indeed, it seemed to pull nearby light into it, giving it a strange penumbra. Whoa. Can't see a word. The spear ran through, and Seth stood still, hand on the doorframe. A reverse lashing required his constant touch, but took comparatively little stormlight. During one, anything that approached him, particularly lighter objects, was instead pulled towards the lashing itself. The spears veered in the air, splitting around him and slamming into the wooden frame. As he felt them hit, Seth leaped into the air and lashed himself to the right wall, his feet hitting the stone with a slap. He immediately reoriented his perspective. To his eyes, he wasn't standing on the wall. The shoulders were. The blood-red carpet streaming between them like a long tapestry. Seth bolted down the hallway, striking with his shard blade, shearing through the necks of two men who had thrown spears at him. Their eyes burned, and they collapsed. The other guards in the hallway began to panic. Some tried to attack him, others yelled for more help. Still others cringed away from him. The attackers had trouble. They were disoriented by the oddity of striking at someone who hung on the wall. Seth cut down a few, then flipped into the air, tucking into a roll, and lashed himself back to the floor. He hit the ground. In the midst of the soldiers, completely surrounded but holding a shard blade. According to legend, the shard blades were first carried by the Knights Radiant uncounted ages ago. Gifts of their god, granted them allowed to fight horrors of rock and flame, dozens of feet tall foes whose eyes burned with hatred, the Voidbringers. When your foe had skin as hard as stone, steel was useless. Something supernal was required. Okay, sorry. Seth rose from his couch, loose white clothes ripped, jaw clenched against his sins. He struck out, his weapon flashed with reflective torchlight. Elegant white swings, 3 of them, one after another. He could neither close his eyes to the screams that followed, nor avoid seeing the men fall. They dropped around him like toys knocked over by a child's careless kick. If the blade touched the man's spine, he died, eyes burning. If it cut through the core of a limb, it killed that limb. One soldier stumbled away from Seth, arm flopping uselessly on his shoulder. He would never be able to he would never be able to feel or use it again. Damn! Seth lowered his shard blade, standing among the cinder-eyed corpses. Here in Alethkar, men often spoke of the legends, of mankind's hard-won victory over the Voidbringers. But when weapons created to fight nightmares were turned against the common soldiers, the lives of men became cheap things indeed. Seth turned and continued on his way, slippered feet falling on the soft red rug. The shard blade, as always, glistened silver and clean. When one killed with the blade, there was no blood. That seemed like a sign. The shard blade was just a tool. It could not be blamed for the murders. The door at the end of the hallway burst open. Seth froze as a small group of soldiers rushed out, ushering a man in regal robes. His head ducked as if to avoid arrows. These soldiers were deep blue, the color of the King's Guard, and corpses didn't make them stop and gawk. They were prepared for what a shard bearer could do. They opened a side door and shoved their ward through, several leveling spears at Seth as they backed out. Another figure stepped from the king's quarters. He wore glistening blue armor made of smoothly interlocking plates. Unlike common plate armor, however, this armor had no leather or mail visible at the joints, just smaller plates fitting together with intricate precision. The armor was beautiful, the blue inlaid with gold bands around the edges of each piece of plate, the helm ornamented with 3 waves of small horn-like wings. Shard plate, the customary complement to a shard blade. The newcomer carried a sword as well, an enormous shard blade 6 feet long with a design along the blade like bursting flames, a weapon of silvery metal that gleamed and almost seemed to glow, a weapon designed to slay dark gods, a larger counterpart to the one Seth carried. Seth hesitated. He didn't recognize the armor. He had not been warned that he would be set at this task, and hadn't been given proper time to memorize the various suits of plate or blades owned by Alethi. But a shard bearer would have to be dealt with before he chased the king. He could not leave such a foe behind. Besides, perhaps a shard bearer could defeat him, kill him, and end his miserable life. Damn. His lashings wouldn't work directly on someone in shard plate, and armor would enhance the man, strengthen him. Seth's honor would not allow him to betray his mission or seek death, but if that death occurred, he would welcome it. The shard bearer struck, and Seth lashed himself to the side of the wall, leaping with a twist and lashing on the wall. Oh, shit, I fucked up. Anyway, he danced backward, blade held at the ready. The shard bearer fell into aggressive posture, using one of the swordplay stances favored here in the East. He moved far more nimbly than one would expect of a man in such bulky armor. Shardplate was special, as ancient and magical as the blades it complemented. The shard bearer struck. Seth stepped to the side and lashing himself to the ceiling as the shard bearer's blade sliced into the wall. Feeling a thrill at the contest, Seth dashed forward and attacked downward with an overhand blow, trying to hit the shard bearer's helm. The man ducked, going down on one knee, letting Seth's blade cleave empty air. Seth leaped backwards as the shard bearer swung upwards with his blade, slicing into the ceiling. Seth didn't own a set of plate himself, and didn't care to. His lashings interfered with the gemstones that powered shard plate, and he had to choose one or the other. As the shard-bearer turned, Seth sprinted forward across the ceiling. As expected, the shard-bearer swung again, and Seth leaped to the side, rolling. He came up from his roll and flipped, lashing himself to the floor again. He spun to the land on the ground behind the shard-bearer. He slammed his blade into the opponent's open back. Unfortunately, there was one major advantage of plate offering. It could block a shard blade. Seth's weapon only hit solidly, causing a web of glowing lines to spread across the back of the armor, and stormlight began to leak free from them. Shard plate didn't dent or bend like common metal. Seth would have to hit Shardbearer in the same location at least once more to break through. Seth danced out of the range as the Shardbearer swung in anger, trying to cut Seth's knees. The tempest within Seth gave him many advantages, including the ability to recover quickly from small wounds, but would not restore limbs killed by a Shardblade. He rounded the Shardbearer, then picked a moment and dashed forward. The Shardbearer swung again, but Seth briefly lashed himself to the ceiling for lift. He shot into the air, cresting over the swing, and immediately lashed himself to the floor. He struck as he landed, but the Shardbearer recovered quickly and executed a perfect follow-through stroke, coming within a finger of hitting Seth. The man was dangerously skilled with the blade. Many Shardbearers depended too much on the power of their weapon and armor. This man was different. Seth jumped to the wall and struck at the Shardbearer with quick, terse attacks, like a snapping eel. The shard-bearer fended him off with wide sweeping counters. His blade length kept Seth at bay. "This is taking too long," Seth thought. If the king slipped away into hiding, Seth would fail in his mission no matter how many people he killed. He ducked in for another strike, but the shard-bearer forced him back. Each second this fight lasted was another of the king's escape. It was time to be reckless. Seth launching into the air, lashing himself to the other end of the hallway, and falling feet first towards his adversary. The shard-bearer didn't hesitate to swing, but Seth lashed himself down at an angle, dropping him immediately. The shard blade swished through the air above him. He landed in a crouch, using his momentum to throw himself forward and strung at the shard-bearer's side, where the plate had cracked. He hit with a powerful blow. That piece of plate had shattered, bits of molten metal streaking away. The shard-bearer grunted, dropping to one knee, raising a hand to his side. Seth raised a foot to the man's side and shoved him backwards with a Stormlight-enhanced kick. Okay, I should be able to just get through this. It's like 3 minutes per page. And I'm busy at 7. So like 10 more minutes, maybe? The heavy shard-bearer crashed into the door of the king's quarters, smashing it and falling partway into the room beyond. Seth left him, ducking his head through the door to the right, following the way the king had gone. The hallway here had the same red carpet, and stormlight lamps on the walls gave Seth a chance to recharge the tempest within. Energy blazed with him again, as he sped up. If he could not get far enough ahead, he could deal with the king, then turn back to fight off the shard-bearer. It wouldn't be easy. A full lashing on a doorway wouldn't stop a shard-bearer, and that plate would let the man run supernaturally fast. Seth glanced over his shoulder. The shard-bearer wasn't following. The man sat up in his armor, looking dazed. Seth could barely see him, sitting in a doorway, surrounded by broken bits of wood. Perhaps Seth had wounded him more than he'd thought. Maybe. Seth froze. He thought of the ducked head of the man who'd been rushed out, face obscured. The shard-bearer still wasn't following. He was so skilled. It was said that few men could rival Galavar Colton's swordmanship. Could it be? Seth turned and dashed back, trusting his instincts. As soon as the shard-bearer saw him, he climbed to his feet with alacrity. Wow, that's a League of Legends term. Seth runs faster. What was the safest place for you, King? In the hands of some guards fleeing, or protected in a suit of shard plate, left behind, dismissed as a bodyguard? Clever, Seth thought, as the formerly sluggish shard-bearer fell into a flurry of strikes. The shard-bearer, the king, aggressively struck out with a broad, sweeping blows. Oh my god, I can't speak! Look at this book. This is the book I'm reading. The king, expecting another strike at his side, twisted with his arm held protectively to block the hole in his plate. That gave Seth the room to run past him and into the king's chambers. The king spun around to follow, but Seth ran through the lavishly furnished chamber, flinging out his hand, touching his pieces of furniture he had passed. He infused them with stormlight, lashing them to a point behind the king. The furniture tumbled as if the room had been turned on its side, couches, chairs, and tables dropping towards the surprised king. Gavilar made the mistake of chopping at them with his shard blade. The weapon easily sheared through a large couch, but the pieces still crashed into him, making him stumble. A footstool hit him next, throwing him to the ground. Gavilar rolled out of the way of the furniture and charged forward, plate leaking streams of light from the cracked sections. Seth gathered himself, then leaped into the air, lashing himself, and right as the king arrived, he zipped out of the way to the king's blow, then lashed himself forward with 2 basic lashings in a row. Stormlight flashed out of him, clothing freezing as he was pulled towards the king at twice the speed of a normal fall. The king's posture indicated surprise as Seth lurched in midair, then spun towards him swinging. He slammed his blade into the king's helm and immediately lashed himself to the ceiling and fell upward, slamming into the stone roof above. He had lashed himself too many directions too quickly, and his body had lost track, making it difficult to land gracefully. He stumbled back to his feet. Below, the king stepped back, trying to get into position to swing up at Seth. The man's helm was cracked, leading Stormlight, and protectively defending the side of the broken plate. The king used a one-handed swing, reaching for the ceiling. Seth immediately lashed himself downward, judging that the king's attack would leave him unable to get his sword back in time. Seth underestimated his opponent. The king stepped into Seth's attack, trusting his helm to absorb the blow. Just as Seth hit the helm a second time, shattering it, Gavilar punched with his offhand, slamming his gauntleted fist into Seth's face. Blinding light flashed in Seth's eyes, a counterpoint to the sudden agony that crashed across his face. Everything blurred, his vision fading. Pain! So much pain! He screamed, Stormlight leaving him in a rush, and as he slammed back into something hard, the balcony doors. More pain broke out against his shoulders, as if someone had stabbed him with 100 daggers, and he hit the ground and rolled to a stop, muscles trembling. The blow would have killed an ordinary man. No time for pain. No time for pain. No time for pain. I don't know what... I need to, establish voices for these characters at some point, if I'm going to continue doing this. I'm picking a random voice every single time. I swear to God. He blinked, shaking his head, the world blurry and dark. Was he blind? No, it was dark outside. He was on the wooden balcony. The force of the blow had thrown him through the doors. Something was thumping. Heavy footballs. The shard bear. Seth stumbled to his feet, vision swimming. Blood streamed from the side of his face, and the stormlight rose from his skin, blinding his left eye. The light. It would heal him if he could. His jaw left unhinged. Broken? He dropped his shard blade. A lumbering shadow moved in front of him. The shard bearer's armor had leaked enough stormlight that the king was having trouble walking, but he was coming. Seth screamed, kneeling, infusing stormlight into the wood balcony, lashing it downward. The air frosted around him. The tempest roared, traveling down his arms into the wood. He lashed it downward and did it again. He lashed a fourth time as Gavilar stepped onto the balcony. It lurched under the extra weight. The wood cracked, straining. The shardbearer hesitated. Seth lashed the balcony downward a fifth time. The balcony's supports shattered, and the entire structure broke free from the building. Seth screamed through a broken jaw and used his final bit of stormlight to lash himself to the side of the building. He fell to the side, passing the shocked shardbearer, then hit the wall and rolled. The balcony dropped away, the king looking up with shock as he lost his footing. The fall was brief. In the moonlight, Seth watched solemnly, vision still fuzzy, blinded in one eye, as the structure crashed to the stone ground below. The wall of the palace trembled, and the crash of broken wood echoed from the nearby buildings. Still lying on the side of the wall, Seth groaned, climbing to his feet. He felt weak. He'd used up his stormlight too quickly, straining his body. He stumbled down at the side of the building, approaching the wreckage, barely able to remain standing. The king was still moving. Shardplate would protect a man from such a fall, but a large length of bloodied wood stuck up through Gavilar's side, piercing him where Seth had broken the plate earlier. Seth knelt down, inspecting the man's pain-racked face. Strong features, square chin, black beard flecked with white, striking with pale green eyes. Gavilar Colin. I expected you to come, the king said between gasps. Seth reached underneath the front of the man's breastplate, tapping the straps there. They unfastened, and he pulled the front of the breastplate free, exposing the gemstones on its interior. 2 had been cracked and burnt out. 3 still glowed. Numb, Seth breathed in sharply, absorbing the light. The storm began to rage again. More light rose from the side of his face, repairing his damaged skin and bones. The pain was still great. Stormlight healing was far from instantaneous. It would be hours before he recovered. The king coughed. You can tell Thedekar that he's too late. I don't know who that is, Seth said, standing, his words slurring from his broken jaw. He held his hand to the side, resummoning his shard blade. The king frowned. Then who? Risteris? Sadeus? I never thought... My masters are the Parshendi, Seth said. 10 heartbeats passed, and his blade dropped into his hand, wet with condensation. The Parshendi? That makes no sense. Gavilar coughed, hand quivering, reaching through his chest and fumbling at a pocket. He pulled out a small crystalline sphere tied to a chain. You must take this. They must not get it. He seemed dazed. Tell my brother you must find the most important words a man can say. Gavilar fell still. Seth hesitated, then knelt down and took the sphere. It was odd, unlike he had seen before. Though it was completely dark, it seemed to glow somehow, with a light that was black. Parshendi, Gavilar had said. That makes no sense. Nothing makes sense anymore, Seth whispered, tucking the strange sphere away. It's all unraveling. I am sorry, King of Alethi. I doubt that you care. Not anymore, at least. He stood up. At least you won't have to watch the world ending with the rest of us. Beside the king's body, his shardblade materialized from mist, clattering to the stones now that his master was dead. It was worth a fortune. Kingdoms had fallen as men vied to possess a single shardblade. Shouts of alarm came from inside the palace. Seth needed to go, but... Tell my brother. To Seth's people, a dying request was sacred. He took the king's hand, dipped it in the man's own blood, then used it to scrawl on the wood. Brother, you must find the most important words a man can say. With that, Seth escaped into the night. He left the king's shardblade. He had no use for it. The blade Seth already carried was curse enough. Alright, that was the epilogue to book. I have to make sure I get a good shot with this because YouTube automatically makes thumbnails for me apparently. Alright, great. I'm sure that'll be one of the options. If that's the thumbnail, I'm gonna be so happy. Okay? So look out for it. I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know if I'll do this again because I just read a book for 36 minutes out loud. It'd be easier if I did not read it out loud. But hey, what you gonna do? Anyway, bye.